like to say, well, that was fun having him on.
You ever get the feeling that everything in America is completely fucked up? You know that feeling that the whole country is like 1 inch away from saying, that's it, forget it. Let's see.
Hey, twist around. Now look, here's a house full of bees. You think the honey badger cares? It doesn't give a shit.
Listen, let's get one thing straight.
Price is right.
Guns don't kill people. I do.
Tell me again why you're leaving. Make it good this time, so I won't ask you to stay. You said you'd be mine. Put it up, did it again.
Check out Liberty Street Podcast.
I risked my heart on red, lost my shirt on black. Should've gone all in on blue. So tell me again why you're leaving.
I don't know who that is, but that was a really good song.
How fucking good is that?
That was awesome.
You do know who that is. I mean, you might not know the name of the band, but you've met the singer before.
Really?
Yeah.
Who's it?
It's my ex-girlfriend, Noelle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. Noelle and the Deserters, name of the band.
Man.
I believe her husband plays drums.
Dang.
On that, I think, or guitar. I don't actually know who her husband is, what he looks like, but my ex-girlfriend who introduced me to Gertrude. So what a
everyone wins.
Fond memories.
That's a great song.
How fucking good is that?
I'm such a sucker for. I love country, but I only like specific kinds of country. Mm-hmm. And this is going to drive people insane. Like, not a big fan of Willie Nelson. Like, I respect what he's done, but it's just not the kind of style that I like.
I could see how Willie Nelson isn't everyone's cup of tea.
This is kind of folky, which
It's also very heavily jazz influenced.
Yeah, which I'm not
a lot of his vocal timing is very kind of syncopated and odd if you really listen to it.
But straight up, like honky tonk country, like Dwight Yoakam stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, God, love it so much.
Right.
It's got some swing to it, or just like a awesome country backbeat like that song had.
Totally.
It's just the kind of thing that you would see in like a Texas Roadhouse, and you're like, tonight's going to be a good night.
That is right in that honky tonk pocket. Yeah. Isn't that good?
Really good.
Impressive, isn't it?
What's the name of it?
The name of the song is Born in the Morning.
What's the band, though?
The band is Noelle and the Deserters.
Huh.
So check them out. It's on Spotify. They just released that song.
After you, is it? She's playing some long game.
What do you mean?
Is your ex-girlfriend?
Yeah.
The Deserters?
Because I deserted her?
Or she left you? I don't know.
Yeah, more like that, probably.
Chicks do evil shit.
Nothing but love in my heart for old Noelle.
Why are you clenching your jaw like that?
Nothing but love in my heart. Speaking of Roadhouse, I watched the new Roadhouse.
I was just talking to someone at our academy that just watched it. Yeah.
What did they say about it?
They said it was good. They watched the original and the second one, I think, back to back.
Wow.
Yeah. And which is more movies than I watched an entire year, pretty much.
It's a marathon.
I have not watched the original for quite some time. I know I've rewatched it since I was a kid, which I loved it as a kid. And I actually, it's one of those things that when I saw, so it's Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor, right?
Yeah.
And I saw the promo for it, I think. And it was one of those things, I think I would enjoy it, but it's one of those movies I'd go in with like really low expectations. Like, I'm not going in there to be like wowed by the plot or the dialogue or the character development. Like,
well, because the original Roadhouse had such a great plot, character development, the story arc.
Well, I'm watching that when I'm 11 or 12 or something like that.
Well, I actually think that Roadhouse was a good movie, the original.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious. Like, I always go back to like,
I wouldn't
does this one
call
hold up?
It was a lovable movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was a good movie, you know, by any sort of artistic
There's
standard.
certain movies that you watch, or even like music that you listen to, like, I just need to turn my brain off.
Right.
Like, not saying that as a pejorative or like it's lesser quality. Like there's certain forms of art, if we use that term closely or loosely, that, you know, I love watching like a sci-fi thriller, for example, or listening to some obscure kind of abstract music, you know, and it makes your brain work. You think about like, man, how do they come up with that thing? Or like, what's going on with the plot here or whatever. And then there's other movies that you just shut your brain off and like, I'm just enjoying this like on its face, like watching
like Red Dawn,
or like John Wick.
Yeah,
it's done very, very well. And you're watching it, and you're just like, yeah, but I'm not expected to be impressed by like the art.
The done very well part I might quibble with on those movies because not that it was done poorly, but you can watch like a Robert Rodriguez movie that is supposed to be just like, you know, total pulp, you know, just like gore and action and boobs in your face kind of. But the way that it's done like an art student would do it.
The new Roadhouse?
No.
Oh, okay.
A Robert Rodriguez.
Okay. Oh, gotcha.
Right. You can watch a you know, air quotes, bad movie that's done well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or you can watch a good movie that's done poorly.
Like some of the Stephen King stuff is like that. Because if you read his books, I mean, obviously the guy is one of the greatest writers, you know, of the last few decades. And the movies are really bad. If you watch like The Mist or Lawnmower Man, you're like, what? And you realize like you know, his genius lies in his consistency. It's like, well, these are supposed to be, he has this weird, campy, almost like sense of humor to make these just kind of bizarre and like not very good. Like Pet Sematary.
Yeah.
And once you kind of cue into that, you know, because this guy is, you know, it's a very, his acumen for storytelling and, you know, presenting certain images or whatever is like off the charts. You know what I mean? You know, he's a very talented guy. I'm like, why are his movies so terrible though? But I enjoyed it. And once you cue into that, you're like, oh, this is kind of this, almost like this Andy Kaufman kind of genius, like where he makes them kind of bizarre.
I think that's even like a whole nother level. Because you don't look at that and go, oh, this is obviously made by an art student. Like you would say with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, they made it a point to
Greatest movie of all time.
You know, certain things cinematographically that were interesting and almost, you know, dare I say, beautiful in that movie.
Yeah.
Whereas you watch the new Top Gun and you're like, there wasn't that much effort put into the artistic kind of framing of things in this.
Yeah.
But still an enjoyable movie.
Yeah, great.
So getting back to Roadhouse.
Okay.
I went into it kind of because I hate remakes. I was going into it thinking this is going to suck.
Yeah.
And because I set the bar so low, I actually kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Expectation leads to disappointment.
Every time.
Relationships and movies.
You want to hear something just not shocking, but kind of just infuriating? There is a new law that is going to pass in California that is, you know how when you purchase a gun in California, you have to take the firearm safety certificate?
Yeah, you have to have your FSC.
Yeah. That's not the case in other states. Are you aware of that?
I am.
Okay. The new law in California is in order to own a gun.
I could completely blank out about what law you were talking about, especially as it pertains to guns. And if you were to say, like, you know, that's not the case in other states, I'd be like, yep.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Well, the ratchet is tightening now. In order to even own a gun, even if you've owned it for 60 years and you moved here 50 years ago from Mississippi, if you own a gun in California, you have to get that firearm safety certificate for every gun.
Yep. You got rid of the grandfather clause.
It's not the grandfather clause that they're getting rid of. They're just saying that any gun ownership now, you basically have to have a permit.
They're
the Second Amendment,
taking yet another step to making a gun registry list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which they don't have.
Yeah.
You know, despite the fact that the ATF shows up at people's houses for all sorts of violations, knowing that they have some guns that they're not supposed to have. You know, there's something that I've noticed in the 2A world is that there's this real reluctance for people to admit or to to define the Second Amendment, and this is the founding fathers' fault, by the way. The framers didn't write this clearly. What the framers should have said in the Second Amendment is that people are allowed to have any sort of weapon that they want because they may need to overthrow the government someday. Should have been written like that.
Yeah.
And because they didn't write it that way, there's all this, it
would cut out all those bullshit conversations of like, oh, what, you need 30 rounds to go hunting? Like, it's not written. The founding fathers didn't just return from a hunting trip and then write the Second Amendment. That's not how that worked.
And there's a lot of people that are 2A advocates who will say things like, Americans had the right to self-defense. That's why it's like, no, don't even say that.
Yeah.
That's giving away too much. Americans have the right to overthrow the government if they see fit.
Yeah.
If that government has stopped serving their needs, because they govern with the consent of the governed. And if the government has all the guns, then it's going to be really hard for people to be able to do that. So the way we're actually writing this is Americans are allowed to have whatever weapon they want in order to overthrow the government when that becomes necessary. And that's really the only argument that matters. Self-defense is a bonus. Hunting is another bonus, but that's not why it was written. And we need to just stop talking about it that way, I think.
I like that perspective. I found an article here that I want. Do you have more to say on that?
No.
Okay. I want to go through this because I thought this, number one, it just pains me if we go one episode without mentioning cannibalism, which we failed to do in our last episode with Bill, the insurance agent.
You could. That's what he was fishing for.
You could tell in that episode where I was quiet for like 20 minutes. I'm just like, there's got to be a tie-in. I got to figure it out. I'm like, but I also thought this was a cool article there's two. To make it overly simplistic, and this is not entirely true, but there's two types of brains that when they take in information, right? And I would use this article as kind of a springboard for the discussion of, with everything that you read, any information that you see, it could be CNN, some weird thing on Telegram, question every word, every sentence, you know what I mean? Like, read it again, read that paragraph again. Does that hold muster? Like, you know what I mean? We should always be doing this this is part of our media literacy course.
It reminds me of somebody once told me, I think it was a film student friend of mine, that they learned in their film schools that every single thing that you see in a shot in a well-made movie is intentional. Right. I mean, if you see the microphone boom come down into the screen and it's a well-made movie, that was intentional.
Yes.
Okay. So same thing with that article. Like, it's especially the headlines, but in the first two paragraphs, like, it is totally intentional. I think that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying, right?
So we're going to use our critical brain, and also this article is just entertaining, and it hits like several different things that we always talk about in this podcast. So start with this. You might have noticed alt-right circles are buzzing with anti-cannibal fervor, and their toxic sludge is once again seeping onto social media. Even if you don't follow any right-of-center accounts, the algos are drip-feeding video after video of what is purported to be Haitian cannibalism into all of our timelines. Okay, those videos do exist, so we can start there. But what is cannibalism, and why is the right so eager to demonize it? And this is where we're going to start having some fun here. If you are to truly believe the reactionaries, cannibalism is the act of eating another human being. Thank you. For some unspecified malicious reason. It's really bad juju, and definitely none under the influence of Satan or George Soros. Okay, so we're putting cards on the table at this point. The imagery and notions underpinning this latest moral panic couldn't be further from the truth. This is so, man. I've been waiting all week to read this too. Cannibal culture is wide and varied and has accompanied our species since the dawn of time. Cannibalism is often a deeply spiritual practice or a desperate act undertaken in times of famine or war, or a sacred act meant to honor a revered dead, which is called endo-cannibalism, which I believe it was the episode that Jake and I did where I compartmentalized all the different kinds of cannibalism, which I didn't know existed at that time. And it was one of the, as far as like, I love researching stuff, but when I got into that, I was like, I could do this for the rest of my life. Okay. So I'm going to read these paragraphs, and then we're going to dissect them, no pun intended, as we go. The Aztecs, for instance, utilized cannibalism in rituals. They believed that their sun god, unpronounceable, was waging a war against darkness. Sacrifices were necessary to aid, unpronounceable, in this war. Though it might seem gruesome to spoiled Western cosmopolitans, who very well might imagine the people sacrificed to be tied up and having this act performed against their will, most evidence suggests that these people were willing participants. And the quote, oh, no, they don't have a source for that.
Right.
It was considered a great honor to aid the sun god.
Well, I mean, they said most. That's
So this is media literacy 101. When someone says most evidence suggests that these people were willing participants. Okay, if most evidence suggests, it clearly you could give us one source.
yeah.
Absolutely not. Okay.
And what define the evidence?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what evidence?
Right. And also that I would add when they, I don't know what the turn of phrase or what the word would be, is like people go back to like antiquated times, like a different time. And look at this, like they would like over glorify the past. They say like, well, the Aztecs did it like this. I'm like, well, the Aztecs also sacrificed like somewhere 500,000 people a year for the sun god. Like maybe we don't look to them as like a model of society.
And disappeared off the face of the earth for some reason.
Yes, and
How
failed to
successful
sustain
were they?
themselves. After the sacred,
Dude, you know what always
Okay.
drives me crazy is that anytime archaeologists find a ruin of like an Aztec pyramid or a Mayan pyramid, every building they find is always some ceremonial thing,
right?
like some religious
Yeah.
thing, as if they never made anything for any other reason. You know,
Yeah.
and that I think is this glorification of the past, that they were all so pious and so religious. All they did was just spend all day worshiping gods and stuff. They never did like any recreation or just hanging out.
There was
drinking
no
with the
iPhone,
boys.
There's no Starbucks.
I mean, they haven't uncovered one ancient Mayan pub, for example. I don't buy that.
This article is rife with that the over glorification of like ancient cultures.
Yeah.
After the sacred voluntary ritual was completed, ritual
They're
can
just saying it now. It was sacred and it was voluntary.
yeah. It's like, well, now that we've established that as fact,
Yeah.
let's move on. After the ritual was completed, ritual cannibalism commenced. The Aztec nobles believed that eating someone that had offered themselves to the gods was considered to be like communing with them. It was not just normal to be eaten by a fellow human being. It was considered a great honor. Okay. No data. Though cannibalism has been an accepted practice for millennia, disgust for cannibalism is a relatively new phenomenon. Cannibalism has been documented in European societies well into the 1800s. During the Renaissance, it was thought that certain part of the body had healing effects, and the consumption of these parts was known as medicinal cannibalism.
This is in the Renaissance.
Right. Public executions were seen as social events from the Middle Ages up until the mid-1800s, and the blood of the executed was sometimes considered to have medicinal healing powers, especially if the person executed was of notable status or had been convicted of a particularly heinous crime. People would gather at executions with cups or cloths to collect the blood directly as it flowed from the scaffold. This practice was rooted in the belief that the vitality of the executed person's blood could cure ailments or diseases when consumed. Okay. Middle Ages. What was the average life expectancy of someone in the Middle Ages? Like 40 something, like 45, something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of child mortality then. So.
Right. And no indoor plumbing.
Yeah. They use
Salem witch trials.
leeches to cure diseases.
Public executions.
Bloodletting.
And they're trying to frame this as in like, well, this actually has this like romantic tie to the past, you know, where they would torture someone publicly and, you know, and then people would drink their blood because they thought that gave them vitality.
Because it was a spiritual event that they all, you know, worshipped these.
And you're like, that's good. How?
Right.
It's like, I don't think I'm taking away from this article like what you meant to convey to me as the reader. While this practice has declined since public executions disappeared, the use of human parts, I love this paragraph so much. The use of human, are you familiar with the false analogy? It's when they take Oh, let me read this to you. You can just keep that phrase in your mind. The use of human parts in medicine is still not uncommon. Fetal stem cells are used in numerous medical treatments. For example, umbilical cord blood, UCB stem cells are widely used in the treatment of hematological disorders. Source, Watt and Contreras, 2005. And fetal, so this person does have the wherewithal to put sources in his article. And fetal neural tissues have been associated with some clinical improvement in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. Quote, or source, Linville and Jorkland, 2004. So what they have done...
false equivalency.
Yes. They have taken like one cutting edge, like modern medicine, something that has benefited and saved lives, and loosely tied it to people eating each other. I don't think you can really tie those things together.
Not lost on me, however, is the fact that, and this is probably why they included it, I mean, they could have used, there's a lot of other things. They could have talked about organ transplants, but they chose the fetal stem cell research because right-wingers also have a problem with that due to the use of aborted fetuses.
Yes. So if cannibalism, and this is where it gets good, the consumption, actually this article just gets better and better and better. The consumption of human matter by other humans is so widespread. Why is Haiti being criticized for this?
Now that we've established that obviously cannibalism is cool
and useful and a great part of society
and should be revered by priests in their stone castles.
When I see these articles, I see the direction they're going. It's much like I have certain friends or family members. Like no matter what you're talking about, I'm going like, wait for it, it's coming. They're going to tie it into it.
And Trump.
More recently, Haiti was called a shithole country by one Donald
There
Trump.
we go.
At the same time, praised countries like North Korea and Russia. That last part of the sentence is actually not true. I fact checked that. And the cake, the dessert, everything that we wanted, like everything in one article. So we ask, what do these people and countries have that Haiti does not? This can only be one of two things.
There's no way you're going to be able to say climate change on this.
So it must be
racism.
The answer, of course, is whiteness. And there you have it. Is it racist?
Wow.
Yeah. And they keep going on about, so that's the title of the article is Dear Racist, Cannibals Are People Too.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
oh my God.
It is.
What newspaper is this?
AFRU.com. The William Shears is the author, and the byline is cannibalism is a practice historically observed in various cultures and ethnicities. However, racists only seem to have an issue with it when people of color enjoy the controversial meal. I would say we're a level above controversial.
And people of color,
it's not just racists that have a problem with cannibalism. I would say it would 90. I'll be charitable. 95% of people have a problem with cannibalism.
I would include like the majority of the animal kingdom in that. Also,
Yes.
does not practice cannibalism.
Here's my message to you people that just insist on shoehorning everything, the entire observable reality through this prism known as racism. You're not helping your case, right? When you come out with these articles that say mowing your lawn is racist, it's a form of white supremacy. Being against cannibalism is racist. It's die on a different hill. I guess I'll say that.
Yeah,
Stick to, there are some awful racist things that happen in our society. Hit those hard, man. Put them in our face. Like, get in, like, get the narrative out there. Like that, there are very like tangible things that we can latch onto. When you do this, you know what this is like? This is like a drunk guy in a bar that goes up to a girl like, I love you. I saw you from across, you're my destiny. And she's like, okay, like get lost. And he goes to the girl next to her, like, I love you, like, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, like, it's just...
I heard you just say that to her.
He's got this thing, and it just doesn't mean anything. Like, that's what this article is like.
Yeah, perfect analogy. Wow. Did you know that...
I was laughing, like, I was reading this the other night, and I was just like, I was laughing so hard, like this can't be real. Like this has to be satire.
I mean, at some point you have to think like maybe there's something else going on. I mean,
Yes.
is it just
Either way, I'm glad it exists. It's amazing.
is it an easy way to make money as a journalist? Maybe it is. Maybe it's just like I got to do something. Another spin on racism. Everyone's eating up racism like crazy. It's like anything you write about racism is going to work.
As I read this article, I kept thinking of the multiple articles that James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose wrote.
The fake ones?
Yeah. And they submitted them and they won awards.
Yeah.
And they were republished. And when they came out saying, like, we made all that up, like rape culture in dog parks, like you guys really bought that. And then the people that gave them awards and republished those articles were so upset. That's why there's such this insane demonization and push against these people. Like, oh, they fooled us. They Trojan horsed us with our own ideology, which is genius.
I will bet you they still believe that there is
Rape culture in dog
parks. I mean, that's just the fact that you made it up doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Just because you call me paranoid doesn't mean those motherfuckers aren't really out there.
Did you know that George Washington died from bloodletting?
Yes.
Had a cold. I mean,
I knew that. I knew he had wooden teeth. Mm-hmm. And something about a cherry tree.
it was not that long ago in the whole scheme of things. They were still doing that shit. So 2 weeks ago, I was talking.
But what do they do with that blood? To go back to the article.
That's exactly. Well, I mean,
for example, our founding fathers.
If you're a racist, then you might find that disgusting. But George Washington was cool with it. It also killed him. So 2 weeks ago, I think I did a little thing on Kathy Hochul, and I was talking about how being in California, it's, you know, we can't really talk shit about other states, but I think New York is actually worse.
Yeah.
And right after that, I saw another video of her talking about the fucked up laws in New York. I'm going to play it for you. So this is her on MSNBC. Old Morning Joe.
Done, but one of the biggest problems we have, other than making sure we have enough resources to fight crime and to drive down repeat offenders, is to go after the crimes that are driving people crazy, like retail theft. I have a whole package on how we can deal with the people who are sweeping the toothpaste off the shelves and the detergent and the diapers and not using them for themselves, but selling them online as part of a larger criminal enterprise. That's what we're going after as well, and I'm working on all those details. But you mentioned housing, Reverend. This is one of the greatest challenges we have in the state of New York, is to stop people from digging their heels in and being so myopic, so NIMBY, that we cannot build enough housing for the families, particularly black and brown families that have been fleeing the city of New York simply because they can't find housing that's affordable. I want New York to be a place where people of all incomes and all races and all...
Fleeing New York, not because of the horrible crime and people being pushed on to subways and the city being overrun with immigrants who are squatting in vacant homes. Vacant homes.
Right.
Mind you, there are vacant homes. And maybe they're vacant because someone's on vacation too long or something. But no, the people are not leaving because of all of that.
Vacation too long. After 2 weeks, it's kind of fair game. I'll just tell you.
Right. Well, that's on you.
You might want to factor that into your cruise.
If you don't have cameras up in your house and you're taking a 2-week cruise, that's on you. I just love that little phrasing. Like, oh, that's people are not leaving because of that. They're leaving because of the high housing costs. It's like
high housing costs are, well, that goes back to the homeless argument. And I said, like, if you and I are going to discuss the homeless problem, which is horrific here in New York and in California, and the first thing that comes out of your mouth is the high cost of housing, I just go like, that, we're done. Like, no harm, no foul. Like, you know, you don't want to admit the truth, and I'm not going to have a conversation with you about this. That's ridiculous. That's what she's getting at. It's it's like a microcosm of the climate change mentality. If problem X, well, climate change. I'm like, okay, sorry, done.
Most of the homeless people in Santa Rosa are not from Santa Rosa.
Yes, California, or not from California.
Okay. So why is it that they would move to California where the housing costs are too high?
Mm-hmm.
Housing costs have caused homelessness, and instead of those people moving out of California, they've decided to live on the streets in California. Not only them, but people from states where the housing costs are even lower have also decided to move to California.
And sub-question, why are the people that already own homes securely are leaving California?
Yeah.
Those two things are related.
And find housing that's affordable. I want New York to be a place where people of all incomes and all races and all ethnicities can find a home, and I want to get that building started now. So I'm unrelenting in this. I'm going to be continuing to work with the legislature and saying we should not be leaving here until we show a real commitment to giving people, everyone, the dignity of a home and focusing on our homelessness, but also making sure the young people coming in search of those great tech jobs that we're creating have a place to live.
Now, switching topics here. You're part of a group of nearly 24 governors.
So,
Al Sharpton's such a fucking scam artist. And he shrunk his head, by the way.
I know, right?
How does that happen?
Weird. Like Beetlejuice.
That's why I always think, dude, I cannot see him. I think about that last scene in Beetlejuice.
I watched this, and then it occurred to me, it's like, okay, the same thing's happening in Santa Rosa. What her solution is right here is to build affordable housing. So government creates a problem, just like she did with the subway stuff.
Just going there.
Government creates a problem. That problem that they created was violence in the subways. Mm-hmm. Now, how do they solve the problem? Okay, our bad. We'll fix it. We're going to fix it not by undoing the thing that we did in the first place. No, we're going to put facial recognition software in the military on every street corner and down in the subways. That's how we're going to fix the problem.
Right.
So, thank you, government, for ruining our infrastructure the way it was working perfectly for hundreds of years, and now fixing it by putting all of us under surveillance.
Whether you're taking in this, our foreign policy, whatever, COVID mandates, anything that government does is fucking terrible. And you have to, once you employ that pattern recognition part of your brain, is you begin to see government or all bureaucracy as like a giant baby Huey, just like crushing buildings. Like, oh, we'll fix that. We'll fix that. And you're just like, no, you did that. Just leave. Like, let us fix it. It's like,
stop doing anything.
It's like having, we're gonna have a barbecue here later, right? And your friend comes over, he's wasted, and he just like trashes the kitchen. I was like, dude, get out of here. Like, leave. You got to go. Like, sorry. Like, you have no self-control. You're belligerent. You're arrogant shithead, and you just wrecked all my shit. Just get out of here. And your friend goes out and talks to him, and he comes back in, and he's like, listen, I talked to him. He's cool. He's going to come back and clean the kitchen. I'm like, no. Like, no, he needs to leave.
Yeah, so he comes
I
in,
will clean the kitchen.
He comes in to clean the kitchen with like a leaf blower and just, I'm helping. Like,
gives you
no.
a bill for like $800,000. You're like, what the fuck is this?
Exactly. And so here's this problem that they've created. People are fleeing New York. They're fleeing New York because it used to be a beautiful place and you ruined that. That's why they're fleeing. They're not fleeing
just like San Francisco.
Because there isn't enough affordable housing.
Yeah.
There's never been affordable housing in New York. Everyone wants to live there. It's the center of business. You've ruined that also. Mm-hmm. Suing Donald Trump for $500 million has made a lot of people question whether or not they want to invest in New York. Right?
And she came out and said after they levied that lawsuit on, it's not the rest of you guys.
No,
it's
just him.
This one guy.
Just him. We're not going to do this to anyone else. And everyone's like, I don't believe you.
Or even if that is true, so it's two things. It's stupid or a liar. Most people, real estate developers go like, uh-oh, this is not good. I'm going to put my money somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Or that is true what she said, and you go like, okay, so this is a political witch hunt. Like, you're trying to jail your political rivals.
Right.
Like, either way, like, you painted yourself in a corner. Like,
totally.
That's fucked.
No, that's not why people are leaving, though. People are leaving because there's not enough affordable housing.
Correct.
So what is the solution? What's the government's solution?
Well, this gets back into that Prop 1 discussion that we never paid off, by the way. And dude, just this morning I erased all this off my notes. But when you look into the details of Prop 1, it's like we're going to provide all this money for more affordable housing to combat the homeless crisis, right? It looks great, the language of the bill. Like even like people that I kind of align with said like, it looks good on its face. However, when you look into it, and this is going to be familiar to you, I think it allocated $6 billion, and they wrapped it up to get our homeless veterans off the street.
Yeah,
less than $1 billion of that actually goes to homeless veterans, and that money went to like this many treatment facilities and this much, this many apartment buildings and so on and so on. And then farther you go down, when you read paragraph 7 or the fine print, you go, what are these treatment facilities really? It's like, well, there's these giant, which are going up in Santa Rosa right now, these giant apartment complexes. It's like, okay, so because we say like, what's the real cause of homelessness? From my walk out the front door test, it's addiction and it's mental health. Those are the first two things. If those don't come out of your mouth, I don't even want to talk to you about it. Like you're not being honest with me, or yourself. And these treatment facilities have no addiction specialists. There's no requirement for being clean. They're basically giant apartment complexes where you can just go and do drugs.
Right.
And as she's saying, we're suffering from a problem of NIMBY. And people go like, I don't want that in my neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, well, you're this, you heartless, callous son of a bitch, bigot or whatever. Like,
no,
you're building an entire apartment complex of people to just hang out and do drugs. Yeah. Like, why would I want that in my neighborhood?
You've created a huge problem, and we don't want that.
And for those of you that want to demonize that statement as saying like, oh, you sheltered, bubble living, these are going to end up in low income and poor neighborhoods that are already struggling. So it's these working class and poor families going like, we're barely hanging on there as it is, and you're going to put this in our neighborhood, like. Fuck no. Like, no, yeah, we are against that.
Right.
And that's how they control the language. They go say like, okay, so you got this whole NIMBY thing going on. And also, this is very similar to, remember we did a dive on they did a similar thing in LA. And they're like, okay, it's going to be this much money and we're going to build this many complexes, right? Mm-hmm. And which turned out to be, I think there were roughly
like $600,000 per unit.
More than that, it was 800.
Okay.
And this one, Prop 1, if you do some simple math, it's $880,000 per unit, which is insane.
Yes.
Like, what kind of house we could build for that kind of money? In California, the most expensive place in the entire country.
Freestanding house.
Yes.
Not a apartment unit.
200 square foot, like basically studio apartment.
It's always the same thing. It's like government is so bad at these things. Why would we ever think,
Baby Huey,
that they were experts in this? Here's the problem. We've identified the problem. It's mental health. We're going to fix it. It's like, you are the most mentally unwell people. No one looks at Gavin Newsom and says, that's a mentally stable dude. Whatever he says, we're going to do that. I'm sure he's figured out
he
how
likes
to
to
fix
work
these
big
problems.
to small. He likes to work big to small.
Fucking psychopaths. So somehow we've decided that we're gonna just trust them, and so we let Kathy Hochul solve this homeless problem by building a bunch of fucking housing for a problem that was never the problem in the first place. But why does she want to build all this housing, you think? So this is where my mind started like kind of...
Dude, if you're about to say something, I had a pretty crazy realization, because this ties into climate change, the electric car, the EV car push, almost everything that we talk about. I'm not going to say it. I want to hear what you had to say.
It's probably not what I was about to say.
Okay.
What I was thinking...
It's not. You're not going to tie us back to cannibalism?
I'll try. You're taking that... You owe me dinner still, by the way.
Wait, for what?
For tying that conversation I had the other day into the central bank. Remember when Gertrude noticed? It was actually the same thing that... I don't remember.
Okay.
You're distracting me. But we have it on tape. We can go back. There was also a story that came out of New York about that woman who was arrested for trying to kick the squatters out of her house.
Right, correct.
And right after that fucking...
Which is not a one-off thing. There is, if you follow the right poor word, but if you follow the same stuff online, that happens over and over and over and over again.
The squatter stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. And who can forget this guy that, this isn't the right one, but that TikToker that went on, TikTok to tell immigrants, illegal immigrants, how to squat in vacant American houses, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, okay, Kathy Hochul is building a shitload of housing in a place that doesn't actually need housing, because the reason people are leaving New York is not about affordable housing. It's about her and her cohorts turning New York into a shithole. Mm-hmm. They're turning it into a open air drug market and just a crime laden fucking apocalypse. Mm-hmm. People are leaving that. They're not leaving to find more affordable housing.
Yeah.
Housing has always been expensive there. She wants to build housing because eventually what they're going to do is move immigrants into the houses. Mm-hmm. That's why I think she wants to build housing. So then my mind immediately turned to Santa Rosa. And Santa Rosa is building housing at an alarming rate.
Everywhere you go in the city, there are giant apartment complexes going up right now.
Yes.
At an insanely rapid rate, which to juxtapose that with the freeway, which they've been working on for 25 years now, it's hard not to have that disconnect sit in your mind.
I have this article here from the Press Democrat by Sarah Edwards called "New Housing Projects Expected to Bring Life, More Foot Traffic Back to Downtown." Basically, this article is an attempt to try to explain that the reason that we don't have a robust downtown that people want to live in is because there's not enough housing in downtown. Okay. And so the city of Santa Rosa, they're building like 1,000 units right now in downtown Santa Rosa. No, it's almost 1,500 right now in downtown Santa Rosa. It's really expensive right now to build in California.
It's insane.
Right?
I just had a friend, we're both contractors, and said like, hey, I bought a piece of property. I just want to get like some ballpark prices to build like a simple, I just told him like, don't build a house. Like, buy a different piece of property with a house already on it.
Build an apartment building. Because if you do, you will get a lot of breaks from the city. Mm-hmm. So the city of Santa Rosa, if you want to build a high density apartment building, they will reduce the design review process from 10 months to 3 months.
Jeez.
The permit costs from $24,000 to $9,000. I'm assuming that's per unit because most permits are a lot more than for a house, or more than $24,000.
I've lost the next 3 huge projects we're about to do.
Yeah.
All the clients bailed because of the permitting process. They got through it and they were like, we're done here.
Yeah.
And these are like extremely wealthy people.
It's almost like these municipalities don't want you building wealthy homes.
Yeah.
And they only want you building high density urban apartment buildings.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't see how people aren't suing them, because they're reducing the cost and the time for you to do it. I mean, isn't that causing some sort of danger to the public by not actually having the sufficient funds to make sure that these houses are being built properly? You know, what the hell? Like, that's the excuse that they give you. The reason that you need a building department is so that they can make sure that your house you build doesn't fall down.
I'm guessing that the similarities kind of did pop in your mind as you're going through these details of the WEF model by 2030 of everyone living in these communal living spaces, high density urban centers. You will own nothing and like it.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that the population of Santa Rosa, Sonoma County is growing or shrinking?
Growing.
Wrong. It's shrinking.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, why, and try to steelman this for me, why would we need to build over 1,000 units. That's just in downtown, by the way. I mean, you go outside of downtown. I mean, all that the stuff on College, over by Costco. I mean, just everywhere you look, there's these
Huge apartment buildings.
ugly ass, huge apartment buildings going up. Why are we building all this if our population is shrinking? I mean, what would a politician tell me if I asked them in the city council meeting?
That the cost of housing has become so much that people are. This is kind of conspiracy tinged here, but abandoning, selling their houses and moving into these high density urban units, which I believe would be the goal.
Okay. But they're selling them to people that are moving to Santa Rosa? Or where are those people coming from?
Okay, gotcha.
Are they going to make the argument that, because the population of California.
No, okay, how about this?
Okay.
This I know to be true, anecdotally, and if you look at the data, is people selling their houses, right, on the outskirts of Santa Rosa, which is very nice and not cheap at all. The amount of people I've known, like, we're out of here. We can't deal anymore. They sell their house or maybe turn into an Airbnb or wherever it is. They move to Nevada and Arizona and Idaho or Montana. And the people coming in are people that can't afford those houses, but they can't afford these little tiny shit boxes that they're putting in downtown.
Not only can they not afford those houses, they can't get insurance for those houses, as we discussed.
There's that too.
With our buddy Bill. So, yes, to answer your question from a few minutes ago, it does seem a lot like what's going on is the 15-minute city model is the model that is preferred. We want to prohibit people from using gas and propane, which if you live out in the country is not only the way that you heat your house probably, but also how you power your generator. Right? We're going to make that illegal.
Right.
You're still on electricity, but kind of barely. Like that power goes out, unlike downtown power does. And if it does, then you have your backup out there. We're going to make that harder and harder.
Right.
You can't get insurance out there, so you can't live in the outskirts.
Not to mention, I would say there's a higher than average. All those houses on the outskirts all have solar too. I mean, the amount of solar panels that I see when you go out there, basically, which is another tick in the category of self-sufficiency. Propane, I got solar, all these things. Okay, let me put it like this, is that we always say this, let's take the 15-minute city thing, and we covered that on another episode. And you go like, they're trying to get everyone in these 15-minute cities, and then your NPC lefty would go like, that's ridiculous. Like, they're not trying to do that. And then, as we say, go like, well, let's just say if they were, would anything be different at this point?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing that's happening in the outskirts that is a problem for having a 15-minute city is small farms. The only farm that can work with a 15-minute city is a huge corporate farm.
Yeah.
With food hubs. Right? Like you have to basically have the Costco and Walmart of farms in order to sustain a 15-minute city, because you can't have these people locked in the city trying to do one-on-one deals with your local farmer.
Yeah.
You can't have like little local grocery stores in your 15-minute city either.
Correct.
Everything's going to just become this like corporate network.
Farmers markets, which are huge here.
Right. Right.
I mean, still are.
Did you
relative to other?
Did you watch that video? Because you just got chickens, right? Or you're about to? Okay. Anyways,
we get them
if
Tuesday.
You were story for another time, I guess.
That's in such a good mood.
I sent you a video about the chicken registry.
Are you serious? I didn't see it.
Yeah. So there is now.
I got to start looking at your texts.
It might help the podcast. There is now a voluntary registry for all animals, including chickens, including if you have one chicken.
We're going to tie this back in. At some point, is the ATF going to show up at my door like, hey, we're just double checking to see what chickens you have, make sure it just matches up with. Like,
There's no registry.
I never registered any chickens. What are you doing on my porch? Come back with a fucking warrant. Namaste.
By the way, if you want that doormat,
I do. I was thinking about that last night. I was like, I gotta order that doormat.
we have a doormat for sale on libertytreelifestyle.com that says Namaste, come back with a warrant. I don't know why that's not in front of my house yet either. We both should have that.
Well done on that, by the way.
Thank you. So yeah, they're cracking down on any sort of self-sufficiency.
Did I tell you, I don't want to derail you, but did I tell you about the guy just this morning, actually? This guy who I really like, he's asked me, he's like, hey, where can I get your guys' rash guards? I'm like, oh, well, let me hook you up with Kelly, but go to libertytreelifestyle.com. And he goes, what are they like? I was like, they're great. Actually, I have probably 10 rash guards. And I have 2 Liberty Tree Lifestyle rash guards, and I wash them over and over just because the quality is so good. And I'm not just pimping our own product. I've told you this personally. I'm like,
you have the camel one. What's the other one you have?
I don't even remember. But remember, because I just ordered another one. By the way, I have to pay for these. Like, we don't get free rash guards from our own company.
That's true.
And I remember I double checked with you. I was like, hey, I want to order another rash guard. Like, you're still using the same company, because I was so happy with the quality of it.
Yeah.
You go, yeah, I am. So this guy goes, I was telling him, I'm like, not just because I'm part of this thing, I don't make any money on it, but highly recommended, and I was talking about like the stitching and the thickness and the way it fit and everything. And he's looking at my leg, and he goes, yeah, you have that Antifa tattoo. And I had to go, well, this was originally the anti-fascist symbol, which I believe in. I was like, it's complicated, dude. I was like, if you want to go get a beer, I can explain it to you. But yeah, he was he's like kind of the duality of man. I was like, yeah, well, let's just call it that.
If you're sold on Matt's pitch there for our rash guards, they run big. So order a size lower than you would normally wear. I was talking about, I mean, this isn't news that they're cracking down on small farmers. I sent another video to the group text, I think, of the Oregon water laws. It actually was all sorts of stuff about Oregon.
Yes.
They passed a law in Oregon now that you cannot use water to even water your garden if you have a well.
You are
prohibited from having a well in Oregon.
Is it Oregon? No, Canada is also passing some of it. As goes Canada, goes California, then goes the rest of the country, which is actually enacted into law. I think there are 14 or 15 states that automatically adopt any climate-related
that California
legislation enacts. They're like, it's on our books. If California passes it, like, it goes directly on our books. And Canada is doing a thing where they're measuring square footage of properties, and then they calculate rainfall, and they're saying, like, you had this much rainwater fall on your property, and they're trying to pass like a tax based on how much rainwater that your property can collect.
That sounds
insane.
That sounds a lot like Oregon. There's a good channel on YouTube called Yanasa TV, and it's this guy. He has a podcast called As a Man Thinketh, I think, and it's just this like farmer guy that is talking about all of the attacks on small farmers across the country and
world, Ireland,
across the world,
the Netherlands.
I mean, he talks just
South
about
Africa.
the ones in the country, but it's all over the world, and he mentions that. But like another one in Oregon that they just passed or was supposed to pass is that if you have an animal, if you have one chicken and you have a concrete floor or a gravel floor or a paved floor of any sort that chicken's poop falls on, then you are considered what is it called? High intensity agriculture. There's an acronym for it. You are classified basically as the same as those giant cattle farms that you see on Highway 5 when you're driving down south,
like Harris Ranch.
Yeah. And so you have to pay the same permitting and go through the same testing and have all the same fees that they do. If you have one fucking chicken and with a concrete floor, you're classified as a high.
Isn't it hilarious
intensity
how much of
agriculture.
these things are all? It's all the same model, it's the same template, but it's putting on this industry and this industry, and it's just exactly what they did with small gun stores with
Right.
the CCTV stuff.
Right.
It's like, hey, like this is what you have to have now. Like any small business typically is barely making it. Right.
Right.
There's not. It's you are a Cinderella story if you are a small business. Like, man, we're just socking away money, especially as they raise the minimum wage in California. I think
Right.
they just proposed was it $20 an hour for fast food workers?
I didn't want to get into this.
Okay.
But I just listened to some shit about that $20 an hour fast food worker thing. You know who's exempted from it?
Panera. If you bake bread,
Yeah.
you're exempt from that. And the owner from
Panera donated
is a huge contributor to Gavin Newsom. But here's where they fucked up, though.
Okay.
I heard an economist talking about this. He goes, well, as these people are typically so short-sighted to do, they're like, hey, we're going to pass this bill because we're basically trying to crush small businesses or whatever, basically push it, just as our insurance episode did, we're push it towards more of a state control, right? And it also it's politically expedient, going like, let's just help out these, fast food workers, let's give them $20 an hour. And people, because they're such fucking emotional soft-heads in California, are like, yeah. And we go, you beat them with their own argument and go like, dude, fuck it, make it 50. See what happens.
Make it 100.
Make it $100 an hour.
Why wouldn't you make it 100?
Just make it $100 an hour for everyone. Let's just see what happens. Now, number one, with these minimum wage hike laws, some of the biggest contributors to that legislation, to the lobbying firms, are people like Walmart and Target and Costco, people that can afford to do that, right? Mm-hmm. So they have very much vested, just like the COVID pandemic and the lockdown mandates.
Funny you bring up Walmart. Mm-hmm. You know who else is exempt? Fast food restaurants that exist inside of grocery stores.
Interesting. Yeah.
So if there's a McDonald's in a Walmart, they don't have to pay $20 an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Got to read paragraph 7.
So it reminds me of when I was telling you I went into the chainsaw store the other day, the steel dealer down here. And I was bitching with him about the law that's outlawing gas motors.
How funny was that disconnect when you were telling me the story? The steel place, blah, and I'm thinking like reliable steel. I'm like, on Highway 12? No, don't. You're like, anyway, it went on for so long. I'm like,
STIHL.
Chainsaw. God, I'm a Husqvarna guy, so.
Yeah. I went in there and I was bitching with the guy about they're outlawing all small motors.
Yeah.
In California. You cannot buy a gas-powered lawnmower in California that was made after 2023.
Right.
And he tells me, I was like, God, I don't know when people are going to wake up and stop voting for these assholes. And he goes, everyone that comes in here says, what? I didn't know that. And they bitch about it. And then I tell them that same thing. And they go, well, I didn't vote for him. And he's like, no one voted for these people. But apparently, someone had to. He's like, I mean, they're in office, but everyone that comes in the store says, well, I didn't vote for him. It's like, well, someone fucking voted for him. So if you're out there listening, stop voting for these people.
Well, to rely on stereotypes, you were in a chainsaw store. I would say most soft-head beta males who are Gavin Newsom fans probably don't know how to operate a chainsaw.
They sell weed whackers and leaf blowers, and
these people pay fucking lower-class brown people to take care of their lawns.
I don't think so. I think the people that pay lower-class brown people are a little bit smarter than just I'm thinking of the people that are living in these apartment buildings that are being built in Santa Rosa that are just kind of like, oh, that makes sense. Like, you hear interviews with the news will go on the street and say, what do you think about this, giving $20 an hour to fast food workers? And the person that answers is always like, well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, everyone's got to be able to live, and you're just like, oh, okay, like, okay. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. You're right. Everyone has to be able to live. And if that's all you need to hear in order to vote for something, then fucking God help us. It's why we shouldn't let everyone vote, by the way.
You know what's going to be interesting to watch, just to take it back to some free market principles, is so the guy who owns the CEO of Panera, works in, greases some palms with Gavin Newsom, which he did, and we have a record of that. And so they go like, yeah, fast food workers, unless you bake bread, I don't know why.
Because that we all can agree
then
obviously makes a
But
difference.
I was listening to The Economist. He's saying, he's like, that's what's the problem with these kind of politically expedient, like nice emotional platitudes. This is how it bites them in the ass, because these people think so short-sighted. They think of the next election cycle, or like, I'm vying myself to be president or whatever it is, allegedly. And they go like, okay, so but according to free market principles, what is McDonald's and Carl's Jr. and Burger King, what are they going to do? Well, they've already started doing it. They just start automating the process, right? Like, okay, well, we clearly can't afford. We're either going to move it to California or we're going to automate our process.
Let me actually quibble with that slightly.
Okay.
If you own one Carl's Jr.,
which is most of these
80%. 80% of
are
fast
franchisee
food
owned.
Are owned. Some companies, getting ahead of myself. Some companies like In-N-Out, they don't have any franchises. Of all the ones that franchise, 80% are owned by single restaurant owners.
Like Chick-fil-A is like that.
They own one restaurant.
Most Chick-fil-A's that you see are owned by one person. Yeah.
Well, 80% of all franchise
80%.
fast food are owned by one person.
Yeah.
There's one person owns one restaurant. That's it. Those guys can't afford automating shit.
It's essentially a small
It's
business.
a war on it's an attack on those guys as much as it is an attack on fast food industry at large.
Yeah.
But if you're a bigger chain or you're fucking Walmart who are franchising and you have your Walmart employees are working the McDonald's in your store, like, you don't give a flying fuck.
Yeah.
Even if they did have to raise it to 20%, they can automate easily.
Yeah.
Right? We see this stuff all the time. It's cloaked in this disguise of, like, we got to help these people that are these poor fast food workers who just can't afford to live. Meanwhile, we pass some law, most of them get put out of business, and all of those people get fired, leaving only the biggest operators in charge.
Yep.
And people never see that because that never gets reported on.
Which are the politically connected. So it's essentially it's a push towards state control.
Yes.
Centralized control.
It's centralized control, which goes back to our 15-minute cities, which are being enhanced by all of this housing that is being built in our town of Santa Rosa. But I don't want to let it go that the other thing that I think is going to happen is all of these immigrants that are flooding our country are going to end up living in these places too, because that's the only sector of the society that's actually growing. Is immigrants, and maybe first generation of immigrants, children of immigrants. California's population is shrinking. Santa Rosa's population and Sonoma counties is shrinking. Yet we're building record number of low-income housing while you trying to do a remodel in your kitchen have to spend 6 months in permitting and God knows how much, money it costs to do it.
Yeah.
But the people that you voted for have passed laws making it easier for the developers.
And then the next level of your equation is going to be the UBI. We have all these people packed into these, high density urban centers. None of them work. We're like, well, that's obviously there needs to be a government program. Now we have the UBI. It's the WEF model. We're screaming in that direction.
They keep these monkeys locked in a room all day, and then they make them jack off, and then they take the cum and they boil it or something, and that's what the drug is made of.
They make them jack off.
Oh yeah, they show them this animal pornography, really kinky stuff like two dogs making love with a cat or, a bat and a pig,
That's bullshit.
Okay, you two, out of my cab. I don't like that kind of language, all right?
Yeah, well, you're obviously not on
Come
it.
on, move it out of here.
You're not getting taller, one, you ugly man.
I don't give a crap, you stupid slinky hoe.
That Yanasa TV guy that I was telling you about. That's what he looks like.
I've seen this.
Let me
This
ask
is good.
Let me ask you
This
this.
is Oregon, right?
I think I don't know where he is. I think he might be in Canada. I don't know. Every video I watch is about a different region. He was just talking about farmers in Pennsylvania having their land taken away by eminent domain so they could put in some freeway.
Right.
and the justification was that there was too many accidents on this other freeway, and so they needed to put a new freeway in to
Well, we
save
need to
lives.
get down to zero traffic deaths.
Exactly. As long as you can justify it by we're saving lives, then it is for the public good, and therefore eminent domain is justified. Which, is there anything more un-American than eminent domain? We're just taking your land. How does the Supreme Court not come and say enough? That is totally un-American. You can't just take people's land. You could make any argument in the world and easily make that argument that it is better for the greater good, the common good. I mean, that is a bullshit justification for stealing people's property.
I would say property rights are, as far as being liberty-based and believing in personal autonomy, property rights are number 2. First one, in my mind, is the First Amendment. And this doesn't go concurrently with the Bill of Rights. But freedom of expression, freedom of speech, religion, whatever it is.
There is no freedom of expression, actually.
Really?
Well, that's been debated. You can't just go express yourself out in public any way you want to.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you can express yourself by blowing up a, building or something. Like it is.
Well, there's a gray area.
There is freedom of speech. Yeah. Freedom to assemble, all that. Sorry, didn't mean to nitpick, but
Okay.
I intend to nitpick. It's important. I mean, this stuff is important. We need to know this shit better than we do now. That's why you ask that dumb shit on the street, like, oh yeah, I think everyone needs to live. We should definitely raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. And that guy doesn't know the first thing about economics or the Bill of Rights or
negative versus positive rights.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just fucking infuriating to me.
Everyone has a right to a living wage. No, they don't. That's not true. That's a complete fallacy.
We live in the greatest country that the world has ever known in terms of personal liberty. And it's slipping through our fingers.
Yes.
And very few people seem to be aware of that and have anything to say about it or know what to do about it. I don't even know if I know what to do about it. I will say this. When the time comes,
do not resort to violence.
Thank you. Unless you have to. Okay, so this dude from...
Do not go into the Capitol.
Exactly.
Despite what that military-aged, very fed-looking guy in body armor is yelling at you.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going to ask you this. This guy, the Yanasa guy here, is talking about an avian flu that has spread to cattle in a few places.
There's an unholy union.
Right? It's very, very uncommon for avian flu to spread to mammals.
Right.
It has happened before. And back in when was that the bird flu was like a big deal? Like 2012, I want to say.
Yeah, right around there. I think 2013, actually.
Yeah, because that's when they put the moratorium on...
they started culling chickens from factory farms, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyways, it's just rare. Just keep that in the back of your mind. It's extremely rare for it to jump. What do you know about gain-of-function research?
I know the very basics of it, which is taking some sort of, everything, going back to the very beginning, since we live in a closed system known as Earth, everything begins with some sort of, so as it pertains to the context of what you're saying, a pathogen. So they take something that's naturally existing, and then through gain-of-function research, they manipulate it and try to make it as deadly as possible, which would be gain-of-function.
Sounds dangerous.
Or
what's the justification?
A bat could hump a pangolin in a Chinese farmer's market, right next to the lab that does this exact same thing.
All kinds of kinky shit.
That dog humping a cat or something like this.
It sounds pretty dangerous. What is the justification for it?
So they can better understand that pathogen and have some sort of a vaccine to prevent it from killing the entire world.
Exactly. Would you guess that gain-of-function research is legal?
It was, and then do I have this backwards? And then it was not, and then it was made legal by it was, and then I think Obama made it illegal. Do I have that right? But they continued to do it anyway.
You're correct.
Yeah.
It was a voluntary moratorium during Obama's administration, around 2012, 2013. Then it was made illegal, but that illegal status ended in 2017. So I don't think most people know this. Gain of function research is happening in the United States right now.
Yes.
Because it is legal.
Even if they made it illegal, I just assume so is detaining American citizens with no probable cause. I mean, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
You just go, well, why don't we move this detainment center from Florida to,
I don't know,
Guantanamo Bay?
Maybe China?
Or China.
To Wuhan, China,
for example.
Perhaps Ukraine would be a good destination.
It's the same way that you make political donations. Well, no, you give the money to this, and then it goes to this, which goes to the super PAC, which goes to the candidate, and that gets us around. I mean, it's a pretty simple kind of shell game.
Exactly. So here's an article. CDC issues advisory on raw milk after bird flu case reported. So currently, the bird flu that's been really going around, it's only affecting birds.
Something like a 56% mortality rate.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's actually killing. It normally doesn't kill waterfowl, and this time around it's been killing waterfowl. So they're kind of concerned about it, and that's why they've been culling all the birds and everything. So
there's been no human cases.
0 human cases.
Right.
I don't know if it was this time around or recently, but I believe there was one case in China. A 30-year-old woman died in China from this.
Well, we can trust our data.
Yeah. What is the error factor on that study? 1 plus or minus a few thousand. And so the CDC has been kind of, responding to this.
That's a load off.
I know. And I go through this article that's, your pretty standard response. People should avoid unprotected exposure to sick or dead animals, including wild birds, poultry, or other domesticated birds, and other wild or domesticated animals, including cattle, as well as with animal carcasses, raw milk,
I see where this is going.
Feces in this article from the Epic Times, in parentheses after feces, they put poop.
That's what I'm saying. You got to have sources when you write these articles.
Yeah, exactly.
Poop, 2007.
Blah, 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 blah. Then I've scrolled down. Currently, there are 11 dairy herds with confirmed positive cases in cattle. So it's jumped to cattle.
Right.
They believe
now that has been a bit of a scientific anomaly.
Yes.
For something to jump from birds to mammals.
Yes.
Right.
It's pretty odd.
Yeah.
But it's something they've been studying, according to this article, for 20 years. And I thought, So on Wednesday, CDC Director Mandy Cowan told ABC News that officials have been prepared for an avian influenza outbreak for the past 20 years. Federal health officials, she added, have been working on avian flu and preparing for it in humans for 20 years. And that we've invested in our ability to test for it, prevent it, and treat it. Which you can translate as gain of function research.
Right.
So they've been fucking with it for 20 years now. And lo and behold, now there is a virus that has jumped from birds to cattle. Do you know what the death rate is for avian flu when it gets into humans? Like they had it last time that it happened, and what they're all saying it is now?
What?
60%.
60%. Okay. That's where I got that 56%. So probably same kind of data set.
Yeah. So this isn't happening yet. And I'm not meaning to be alarmist, but what is happening is gain of function research in the United States. And now all of a sudden we have a flu that has jumped from birds, and a bad flu, a flu that's like affecting birds all over the place, has jumped into cows. It's not killing cows. It's just making them sick.
Right.
But we know from an article that we recently read in a podcast that we listened to that you can take a virus and make it much worse by introducing a vaccine into the population during the time of mass infection, right?
Mm-hmm.
It turns the virus, it encourages the virus to mutate, much the way that a bacteria will mutate. If you have a antibiotic that doesn't kill all of the bacteria, the ones that are left tend to be the most virulent and powerful, and they will then survive and be totally immune to most antibiotics.
Which also that podcast, which we're going to do a deep dive on later this week, which is probably going to be one of the more, it's up there with the Deagel statistics as one of the more darker things that we've ever done. But one of the points of that article, he said, like, when you have a pandemic, using my finger quotes there, and you introduce a vaccine at the wrong time, you're going to make that whatever pathogen even worse. Same thing that if you have some sort of infection, the people that take antibiotics over and over and over again is you're creating these super strains of staph, for example. I've known some of these people personally who overuse antibiotics. They got staph and they could not get rid of it. They're like, it's antibiotic resistant. There's nothing we can do.
Or if you misuse antibiotics, like you don't take your full dosage, and you stop a couple days short, or you don't take enough of it, then you leave just the most resistant ones that are just hanging on for dear life.
It's like having a little brother and you beat the shit out of him every day, but you don't ever kill him.
If you don't kill him,
by the time he's 18, he's a killing machine.
Exactly.
It's like the toughest dude you've ever seen.
All right, so I'm going to play this clip.
That's totally hypothetical, by the way.
If you're listening.
Will it impact meat prices? I don't know, because we don't know how far it has spread. But my theory is that it is already spread further than what we've been made aware of. But the other concerning side of this is that we started seeing, this bird flu end up in mammals, particularly things like mink, animals that would eat birds. And so it wasn't unusual to see them contract a disease from eating the birds. And maybe, this is specific to dairy. Maybe it's, being found birds are pooping in their feed or something. I don't know, but it seems as though the spread of it, it seems to be a little different than food.
This is where my mind went when you first brought this up, by the way.
To where?
Where it jumps to cattle. Because I immediately thought, there's a war against meat, particularly dairy.
Yep.
Dairy and beef cattle. And that's what I thought. I'm like, what's the most consistent thing that authoritarian psychopaths do?
Tell you what they're going to do.
Tell you exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to stop this. We need to stop this. We need to stop this. Like, whoa, look at this new thing that's coming out, and it affects this. And you're like, that's a hell of a coincidence.
Sure is.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. This is a developing story for everybody, but it will be interesting to see what happens here, and we need to be concerned about the spread of HPAI into mammals.
HPAI is highly pathogenic avian influenza.
Mm-hmm.
That's the name of this bird flu that will kill 60% of the people that it infects.
Mm-hmm.
Which I couldn't help but think fully lines up with the Deagel statistics also.
Yep. Yes.
If this happened...
for those of us newcomers, the Deagel statistics were...
dude, honestly, hold on. Do you tell people what it is? I'm going to look up what episode that was.
The Deagel statistics were... Deagel.com is a military-industrial complex aggregate sites, and I highly suggest going there. It's DEAGEL.com, and you can see what weapons, munitions, planes, boats, everything was sold to what country for how much money and what their population is. And it's like one of the most wholly comprehensive sites I've ever seen. It is fascinating. I suggest pouring a glass of wine and making a Saturday night out of it by yourself. Don't drag your wife into the shit. She will not be having it, by the way. But they projected in 2025, which has since been scrubbed from the internet, a drop in the population in only specific countries, specific areas of the world, a decline in population somewhere between 60 and 75%.
Go
ahead.
I can't find it off the top here. We probably didn't name it like the Deagel episode, but I will find it and put it in the show notes. If you guys are listening and you want to listen to that episode, I'd highly recommend it.
It'll keep you up at night.
Fucking shocking. And we go back and forth. We always think like, God, could that possibly be true? It can't be true that the world's population is going to be reduced by 2/3. I mean, that's just insane, right?
Yeah.
But then, God damn it.
Well, what has been interesting is we did that episode, a year and a half ago?
I could tell you if I could find it.
Okay. So let's just say a year and a half ago. And at that time, I'm the one that presented that stuff to you guys. And because I'm a sucker for this dark stuff, right? Still, and we had this conversation in my mind. I'm like, is it true? Like, okay, how legit is the source? So then that's how I went into the deep dive into the website. I'm like, okay, if this is fake, someone spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with a team, a multimedia team of double-digit people to put this together. I mean, this is insane. Like, this would be the world's most economically unsustainable prank like ever.
With the least payoff, too.
With the least payoff.
What do they possibly get out of this?
Yeah.
Because it's since been scrubbed from the internet. You can only find it.
Just that part, not the entire website.
Correct. The website's still there. You can go look it up, and you can find out how many Tomahawk missiles Egypt ordered last year.
Right.
But you can't find this one page, which has been scrubbed, that says that the world's population has been reduced. Because they still have population predictions, I think. I think that's still part of it.
Yeah.
But this one that predicted that 2/3 of the world's population was going to die off has been scrubbed. And it's like, if this is all just a prank, it's been going on for decades, and it's got to cost tons of money to enhance, and there's no payoff. Where's the payoff? Like, it doesn't make sense that this would be just a prank.
This is interesting because this gets into, like, for example, like the flat Earth. Because I always say, like, well, cui bono, who benefits?
Right.
We always try to squeeze in some Latin on our episodes.
Well,
I just don't understand, like, who would benefit from this. Even though I love the conversation, and I'd love to, like, have the banter about it. But here we are a year and a half later after that Deagel episode. And you're like, wow, that's pretty fantastical. Like, not as in awesome, but, like, outside the realm of, like, what I would have normally thought, we could say. And then since then, a year and a half later, here we have this guy. We have the episode that we're going to do later this week with the Belgian virologist. We have Edward Dowd with the excess mortality rates coming in the congressional hearings. Mm-hmm. We have all this stuff coming up. I'm like, and I kept texting you as we're, like, sending this stuff back and forth and listening to it. I'm like, it's getting a little creepy, that thing Deagel, much like Booster Rage that we came up with off the top of our heads. Like, that's funny. And then 2 months later, the WHO says, like, one symptoms of taking the boosters is psychopathic behavior. I'm like, oh, fuck. It kind of came true, as it turns out. Well, here we have this slow drip, this low vibration information release of all these things coming out that perfectly align with the Deagel statistics, which were supposed to come true in 2025. And I was recently listening to an episode, which I want to do tomorrow. Edward Dowd has refined his information, or they've gotten more aggregated, even more information, and have said, like, 2024 is going to be a hell of a year.
I was
like,
just going to say,
really going to be the marker for,
all of these people are predicting that it's happening now, basically.
Yeah. Which perfectly aligns with the website or the podcast you sent me and the article, which we're going to do. And all of those. So we have, like, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different sources, all hitting different, like, aspects of this. The cattle stuff, the insurance data, the disability rates, the excess mortality rates, the turbo cancer rates. And you put all this stuff together and you start adding it up. I was telling this before. I'm like, it all roughly adds up to somewhere between 65 and 75%, which perfectly aligns with the Deagel statistics. And it's just, I'm surprised by nothing anymore. It's bizarre. It's a weird, like, my mind has just been spinning about this. Because you start out with something like, that's awesome and interesting, and let's talk about it.
But we're skeptical.
Like, it's like, I don't think really. And then, like, a year and a half later, you're like, holy fuck.
I'm trying to be skeptical, like, and this shit keeps lining up.
When you just look at the data and, and do some simple math, you're like, they might have been onto something there.
I think we should probably pause here and do a part 2. One of the things, though, that I keep thinking, this is probably because I'm a fucked up individual, but there's just part of me that is maybe curious about this. What does the world look like if 2/3 of it just disappear? As sad as that's obviously going to be, what are we in store for? You know, like if you could go back in a bubble and witness the meteorite that hit the earth and killed the dinosaurs, or witness the fall of Rome, or witness, all these tragic events, but historical, like we may be about to live through one. And as hard as it's probably going to be, I am kind of like, my interest is kind of piqued. I had a client one time that they lost their house during the 2017 fires. And it was a house that he and his wife had built by hand. And they put cedar siding on it with stainless steel nails that they nailed in by hand. Wow. And it was like 3-inch lap. Like, dang, thousands of stainless steel nails. And when the house burned down, there was just like these piles of stainless steel nails all over the place.
Interesting.
And he told me, he goes, and he was an engineer. He had kind of his brain worked kind of in a cool way, but different. He goes, I would have loved to have just been in a fireproof suit or something and just stand in the middle and just watching it burn.
I love engineers.
And I kind of relate.
I laid down my cards, opened up my heart. What a fool I was to be so bold. I know love's a gamble. Now my heart's in shambles. That's it, baby, I fold. I won't believe you when you tell me that you're leaving this time, my dear. 'Cause I was floating in the morning, but not this morning, so here, let me hold your beer.